I spent 21 years in the Royal Air Force as a helicopter pilot. You can probably see a helicopter behind me there. So I flew the Puma helicopter, which is, most people will think of it as an army helicopter, but we put people in the back and we get them from A to B. So I did that for 21 years. And then towards the end of my career, I realized I had a passion for kind of what makes us tick and how we can really get the best out of our minds. And I decided to set up my own company called H.A.B.I.TS, and I now do coaching and speaking. And I talk about how to train our brains to perform optimally under pressure, and ultimately to be happy even when life gets a little bit challenging.
Very good. And before you joined the RAF, where did you go to school? Did you go to university? And what sporting interests do you have?
So I went to school in Edinburgh at a school called Mary Erskine, and then I was actually sponsored by the Air Force during school and uni, so always knew that I was going to leave and pursue my career there. But I went to Cambridge University. I have got a university, I've got a Cambridge Blue in rugby, which some people don't know. I think I got there more through luck than judgment, really, but I was relatively fast at running back in those days, so they stuck me on the wing, and managed to play against Oxford in the varsity match. But these days it's probably more running and just generally keeping fit would be my main interest.
Yeah, I share a common interest in running. Now, I used to be a sprinter myself, but at best now I'm a jogger. But anyway, right. Yeah. I've got a question for you. What motivated you to join the RAF as a commissioned officer after reading natural sciences and theology at Cambridge University?
Yes, there's an official answer and a less official answer. The official answer is that I wanted to be part of a family that served our Queen and country, which is true. But if I'm really honest, the inspiration was Top Gun. And I remember watching it when I was very young, and I set my mind to the fact that one day I was going to be doing something like that. So not much of, it's interesting because I did sciences at university because I thought that is what would be most helpful and most likely to get me in to the Air Force as a pilot. But in the end, it doesn't really matter all that much as long as you do something that you love, because you get all the training that you need when you're in the Air Force.
And initially, when you went into the Air Force as a cadet officer, did you have to do training alongside potential pilots who are going to be flying fighter aircraft, for example?
Yes. Well, when you start out, you're all just pilots in a pool, really. And there's a kind of the training system is set up so that you all start flying a little aeroplane, a sort of puddle jumper aeroplane. And then after that, they decide if you're going to go fighters or if you're going to go helicopters or if you're going to go multi-engines, which is a big aircraft. So we all start out doing the same thing, and then they just pick people who they think will do well in the fighter world. And I did actually get selected to go fighters, as you would call it. We'd call it fast jets. And I flew on the Hawk, which is what the Red Arrows fly. So most people kind of know what that looks like. But I did eventually run out of talent and decided to fly something a bit slower. So I went into the helicopter flying world.
And may I ask, did you do one of those tests where they test you for, the impact of G forces on your body?
You don't have to do that as a helicopter pilot, and I don't know why we weren't doing it. Maybe it was later on that we did the G force thing. So no, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I never did that.
Okay, well, we move on here. Every emotion, every thought is transient. How does this help people to fight fear?
Well, I think it's hugely helpful because, and I spoke about this at the PSA summit at the weekend, which I know we were just talking about before. I think fear is such a powerful emotion, and it's often the thing that stops us from doing things. And, in theory, that's to stop us from killing ourselves. But I think it's important that we realize that we've learned to be afraid of things that don't kill us. In the old days, we would have had to run away from stampeding bison or whatever it was. But these days, the things we fear probably won't kill us, deadlines or scary bosses or looking stupid in front of people. And therefore, we don't actually have to fight the emotion. I think we can just acknowledge that the emotion will probably feel worse than it really is. And also that if you do nothing at all, it will just pass, because nothing lasts forever, including emotions. And actually, the less you wrestle with it, the sooner it will pass. So the temptation is to do something with it. But if we can just sort of sit on our hands and accept it, then actually it will pass, and we'll feel a little bit more confident in our ability just to sit with a little bit of difficulty.
I think what you're saying there, Sarah, is not to overthink issues in your life, because you start to see yourself as a negative person rather than being a positive person. And by overthinking, you're making the problem or the issue greater than it actually is. It's much more effective to go out there and get help and seek advice from people if you're unsure what to do yourself. So overthinking is never a good idea. Looking back at your career in the RAF, what is the greatest life lesson that you learned?
Gosh, that is a good question. What is the greatest life lesson? I mean, there's a lot, but I think, the thing that I talk about now is rejection, which is not the most, it doesn't sound like a very fun subject to talk about, but it's certainly my own personal nemesis, I suppose, was always trying to fit in, always trying to be like everyone else. And, for whatever reason, I didn't always feel like I fitted in. And I think we can all identify with that, whether you don't have to be a woman in a man's world, or I think we can all identify with not feeling like we're part of a tribe. But I think the Air Force has got such a strong tribe culture that sometimes it felt even more isolating. And so I really learned to make my peace with the fact that we can't be everything to everyone all the time, and trying to put this mask on to be what you think other people want you to be is usually a waste of time, and it doesn't work anyway. So I think my greatest life lesson was just to worry less, about not being liked. And also, I think when I really boil it down, and we're going deep here, I think a lot of the time it wasn't really them rejecting me. It was probably me rejecting them, because I didn't believe that they would like me as I was. So subconsciously, I wasn't allowing anybody to accept me, because I didn't think that I was deserving of it. And I think, a lot of us, whether we realize it or not, underneath it all, we do worry that we're not enough, and therefore we might hold people back without even knowing that we're doing it.
It's a very interesting point you're making there, because I've watched a number of programs on TV over the years where people have, enlisted in the armed forces, whether it's the Army, the Navy, the RAF, for example. And the impression you get from the word go when you arrive for your initial training is the Army or the Air Force, the Navy, it's all about teamwork. And you nearly have to roll yourself into being a team player. So if you're an individualist type of person, you might find the initial training very difficult in the armed forces. You almost have to change your personality as such to become the team player they want. And you have to learn, I suppose, to keep your opinions to yourself, because, when authority says to you, go and do something, you don't question them, you have to do it. There's no answering back as such. So you have to learn to show, I suppose, a sense of decorum, and to show some discretion, and to be a team player, no matter how difficult that may be at times. With great responsibility comes great power. Please explain this statement.
So I was chatting to someone at the weekend about this. We can't work out who first came up with it, because we both thought we came up with it first, but we didn't. It's so that, the phrase normally comes, with great power comes great responsibility, but actually the reverse is more powerful in a way. And what that simply means is that it's natural to shy away from taking ownership. Anger is a very great emotion for deflecting blame outwards and going, this person has wronged me. And often it's stopping us from that scary reality that, maybe what we did at that moment wasn't perfect. But actually, when you realize that you are responsible for your actions and indeed your thoughts and feelings, because only you get to decide how much attention you give to them, when you make your peace with that, actually, that also means that you're in charge of it. So you have an opportunity to change it or just to show up as you are. So I think it's natural to resist this idea and think, well, I can't help, I can't help it. This person has, provoked me, or, I can't help how I feel. And so it's comforting in the short term to think that we're not responsible. But in the long term, when you realize that that power is yours, then you can go out there and be who you want to be.
Very good answer. What do you think the future is for the defence sector within Europe, now that many NATO countries are looking to increase their defence spending budgets after the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Gosh, I wouldn't speculate on this because I'm simply not informed enough. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm just going to say I think we need to wait and see what happens.
Okay, fair enough. No problem at all. Describe what unitasking is and how does it help a person to perform under fire?
Yeah, great question. So unitasking is the opposite of multitasking in that you're just doing one thing at a time. And it's called that because I think there's a culture where we all want to do as many things as we can. I think maybe during COVID as well, we actually learned to fill the gaps, where we naturally had gaps where we might commute or go and, stand around the water cooler. And we've actually filled our days up, a lot of us. And so we're just doing so many things all the time. And that's what our brain is doing, even though we can't see it. Our brain is just darting from task to task. And it's not actually very good for us. Our brain doesn't really like it. And our performance goes down and it increases our stress levels. And we actually become less effective. So although we're doing it to try to achieve greater output, the reverse is true. So the opposite is simply just to focus on one thing at a time. And when you do that, you can, because you're giving your full attention to it, you will give your best possible performance. And that is well known. That's been echoed by performance athletes and concert pianists. So it's a well-known thing. I think today's challenge is actually putting it into practice because we've become so used to trying to do so many things at once. So I think that we need to just go back to basics and train our brains to focus on one thing at a time. And you can do that simply by just following 5 breaths when you wake up in the morning, and just focusing on your breathing and nothing else. And just reminding our brains how to do that, because it will pay dividends.
Would you recommend that people get their plates spinning and organize their week such that they get, reminders out to people that they need X, Y, and Z done by a certain date to ensure they meet deadlines, but at the same time, they try to concentrate on one task at any one time?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We do like to have a list of things to achieve. And I think it's a really good idea to schedule and to prioritize. I think it's worth sharing the idea that having a to-do list can actually just create an unhelpful sense of urgency, because the temptation is just to add more things to the list. And then the inevitable result is we end up multitasking to try and tick things off the list. And I found myself doing it the last couple of days because I'm going on holiday next week and I'm trying to get everything done that I think I need to get done. But the reality is, if 1 or 2 things get dropped, they probably weren't that important anyway. So I would just say, I would advise some caution about to-do lists. And if you are one of these people, and I am, have been too, pay attention to how your brain feels when you've got a long to-do list. Is it helping, or is it actually making you feel more frazzled? And if you're feeling more frazzled, you might not be prioritizing as effectively as you could be. I would say perhaps a more helpful solution is to actually schedule and be very strict about, how many tasks you can realistically schedule for that day.
That's an interesting perspective on life. And I'm one of those people who actually carries around their to-do list in their head. and I
Yes.
decide in the morning time what I'm going to do that day. So that's how I manage my life as such. I have a very kind of, I keep my options open in life. And I've got a very spontaneous attitude to life, and I'm much more, I like to keep my options open. I don't like to be rushed into making a decision. And I generally I'm not a fan of too much structure. The least structure around me, the best for me.
Right.
Amazing. I'm not sure I cope with the armed forces now, to be honest, but there you go. How can curiosity drive change, collective intelligence, and effective communication?
Yes, great question. So I think I wrote a blog about this recently, which I'm guessing is where this question has come from. And it was after I was interviewing the vice president at Cisco, Emma Roffey. I was really kind of struck by the way her team just seemed to have this kind of aura about them, and it really impressed me. So she kindly agreed to let me interview her. And when I was asking her about, what leadership looked like to her, I just remember coming away with this real impression that there was this curiosity. And when I say that, I mean, it replaced any requirement to take things personally. And that's why I think it's so helpful, because often, the example I cited was someone that you care about walks up to you and says, right, something's got to change. What's your initial thought or feeling in that moment? If it was me, I'd probably be thinking, well, what have I done? And you're kind of instantly on the back foot. So that tells you a lot about how the brain regards change. We fear it, of course we do. But I think also it's because we often take it personally, and we don't really need to. So curiosity is a great way of reframing it and sort of saying, oh, that's interesting that you said that. I wouldn't have thought of it like that. Can you tell me more? So it's a great way of opening our minds up. And again, it helps with collective intelligence, because then rather than everybody having to agree with you, which is what we want because it validates our own thinking, rather than taking that as something that has to be that way, we can foster collective intelligence by being curious about what other people think and feel, and recognizing it's not more right or more wrong. What we think and feel is driven by how we've been brought up, our values, our beliefs. So there's no need to sort of think that one is better than the other. It's just a product of the environments that we've been in. In that case, it's fascinating to see how we've all developed differently in these different environments, and we have these different thoughts and feelings. And what a rich world we have when we can open ourselves up to learning more about what other people think and feel and believe.
Got a question for you here now, Sarah. When you resigned your commission with the RAF, were you prepared, or did they help to prepare you to return to Civvy Street from the military?
Yes, they do have a resettlement program. I think it's a really big challenge that's recognised by the armed forces, but also I speak to quite a lot of organisations. Deloitte, for example, are really good. They're a really good example of people that actively recruit from military and try to make the transition as painless as possible. So I think I should start by saying it's quite a sizable task, but certainly for people that have been in a long time, because it is a real way of life for them. And like you say, we have structure, we follow orders, and we almost blend in to a certain degree. And then you're suddenly out in the big wide world, and it's all very different. So the military does a resettlement program where you can sign up for certain courses to get yourself qualified. And I think there's quite a lot of charities out there as well that try to help veterans. And then again, there are organizations that are quite military facing that kind of really get it, and they really try to make that journey as painless as possible.
Going back to your time in Cambridge University, and you were selected to play for Cambridge against Oxford in the university match. What thoughts went through your head when you ran out on that pitch to play?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I was chatting to someone this morning actually about the fear of success. And when I look back on my life, and rugby was a really good example of this, if I'm really honest, I was afraid of the ball. I didn't really want anyone to throw the ball to me, even though I was the winger. My job was to run down and score tries. And I was reminded of that because my son is 7 and I was seeing him sort of dancing around. I was like, he's afraid of the ball, just like I was. And it's almost like, we don't want that success. We're afraid of what will happen if we score that one try. Will they expect me to do that again tomorrow and then again the next day? So if I'm really honest, I think my response was, great, I've been picked. I'd rather have been on the sideline cheering people on. And we did play against Oxford, and we'd been told by our coach he thought we were the first team that might actually beat Oxford, because Oxford had a clean record of beating Cambridge. And we went along to Iffley Road to play our match, and we were beaten 67-0. So really quite convincingly. But yeah,
a drubbing.
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed. Back at your career in the RAF, Sarah, were there any hair-raising or near life-ending moments for you, particularly in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yes. I mean, there have been a few times that I was shot at. There's been a few times that we were mortared when we were in our camps. So they certainly focus the mind. I mean, probably the closest I've been to death would actually be in training, because we have a bit of a mantra of train hard, fight easy. So we deliberately train and train and train and train and train, so that when we're in the battlefield,
very good,
all the hard work's being done. So I'm not saying that going into a war zone isn't dangerous, but the military does sort of get that right. I think it does really train us very, very well to be able to respond really well under fire.
And did you worry when you went out on deployment to Afghanistan? Because looking back at the original Afghan war between Afghanistan and Russia, the Afghan rebels were supplied with missiles by the CIA via Pakistan, and they started to take out a lot of Russian helicopters. Did that worry you when you went out to Afghanistan on deployment?
Yes, I mean, we have a pretty good idea of what the threat is out there and what missiles they've got. So it focuses the mind, and that there are people there that don't want you there, and they're going to have a pop at you. So it certainly makes you confront your mortality. And again, it's interesting because you're probably in more danger driving down the M1, but it's more obvious. And I think that's the other thing is, every time I deployed, I'd get my will, updated, and I'd write my eulogy or whatever it was. And then I would ring all my family and say, I love you. And they'd be like, Sarah, it's fine, you're coming back. But I remember actually the thing that really frightened me the most was me not having a chance to tell my family how much I cared about them, because I know I could be quite tricky and awkward. And I thought, I don't want the last conversation we ever had was, me telling them to naff off. So I think that's what frightened me the most, was not having a chance to tell people that I thought they were pretty fantastic.
As a veteran of the Afghanistan and Iraqi campaigns, what is your view on Ukrainian people returning to their homeland to fight the Russian invasion? If you were a Ukrainian national living in the UK, would you follow the lead?
Yes, I would. I think they're very brave. I feel for the Russians too, because I know what it's like to be in a country when you're not wanted. So, I ultimately, I think that we're all human beings, and war, no matter how much we glorify it and, make films out of it, there's just nothing nice about war. But yes, I would go and stand next to my fellow Ukrainians.
3 remarkable things I've learned from today's interview with Sarah is, firstly, don't overthink life. Thoughts are transient. If you think too much about life, you make yourself become a negative person. So let thoughts flow through and deal with them proactively. Secondly, train hard and fight hard. Whether you're in the military or in civilian life, give your best at all times. And thirdly, be structured, but don't have too many to-do lists or too long a to-do list in your life. And take one issue at a time and close it out. Don't try and have too many issues ongoing at any one time. And also get your emails out there to people and make sure they're clear of what your expectations are of them. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today before I let you go?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to you, John, for having me on the show. It's
Very welcome.
been really great to chat to you. And I know we're both members of the PSA, so it's been brilliant to be able to meet so many interesting people through that. If you want to come and say hi to me, I'm usually hanging out on LinkedIn, Sarah Furness. So please do come and connect and say hi. It's always great to hear from people that watch the show.
You're very welcome. And on that note, I'll bring today's show to an end. Thank you, Sarah.